Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I'm Straw Greenhorn. And Jesus cometh again and findeth the disciples sleeping. And he said unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Dost thou not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you enter not into temptation, for the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. So he went away again, prayed, saying the same words. So when he cometh the second time, he findeth them asleep, for their eyes were heavy, neither wist they what to answer him. Now when he came the third time, he said unto them, Sleep on, take your rest. It is enough. The hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Arise, let us be going, for he is at hand that doth betray me. So here's the final moment before he is taken. He's actually being taken right now. So we see him right now, going to pray. And we know that he just took the three main disciples, Peter, James and John, where he said unto them, tarry here and watch. He separated from the others, further out, on the perimeter. And he took these ones in, telling them to tarry with him. So we see him coming here and finding them asleep. And by his reaction, you can tell that when he asked them to tarry, he was asking them to be active and proactive in what was going on. He was asking them to hold him up. I'm picturing right now in the battle when Moses, I forget who the children of Israel were fighting, and Moses, he was up on like a cliff area, overseeing the battle, and whensoever Moses held his hand up, the children of Israel prevailed. But then whenever the hand will fall, then the enemies would start winning the battle. And Moses, it was a long battle. He was holding his hands up for so long that he began to be tired and he couldn't hold it up. So, Joshua, and I forget who the other one was, they sat him down on a rock, stone. They held up his hands. So, if you understand Jesus, he's been carrying the torch the whole way. I mean, it was just been all on him. And, he is able to finish this race. He's able to finish the battle. It's not that he needs any help, but, he's asking for it. It's not that he needs it, but he's asking for it. Because, it's not going to change anything that he does. But I guess, to know that he had the support that he asked for would have, cheered him up even a little bit more. So, he's really asking them to hold his hands up as, they did Moses back, in that time. So how do we end up here? We just came from the Last Supper where we did the communion. Take, eat, this is my body when he broke the bread. This is my cup, the wine of the New Testament, the blood, which was the wine. And we went out to the Mount of Olives. Judas having separated, going to, because, he already made the agreement with them that he would trade him for money. So Judas, he's gone to go bring the chief priests and elders unto him, which is right now, as you see at the end of these scriptures. That's right when the point where we see Judas entering. So when we got out there to the Mount of Olives, he began to show them that they should all be offended. It's not because of me, because it's written, I will smite the shepherd and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. Simon Peter began to be so vehement, saying that though all men should forsake thee, I will not. Jesus said, verily I say unto you that this night, that this day, even this night before the cock crowed twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. Simon Peter was like, though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. And so said the other apostles. So then that's when he separated. He came to the Garden of Gethsemane. He came to a place called, Gethsemane. And he left, the other, because it would have been, because, Judas, he went to go get, the chief priests and elders to come arrest him. He told them to sit and watch while he took, these three, told them to tarry, prayed saying, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. So we see him here. It doesn't say how long he prayed for, just that he prayed. And, we see him praying and then, getting up to come check on the, the three, and then, finding them asleep. I mean, I would say that this was, unlike him, to be praying in communion with God and then, checking, to see if support is doing what it's supposed to do, if support is nearby. When you walk, like I said, when you walked on the water, he sent them away by ship. That's how, he had to walk underwater to get to where they were in the ocean. He wasn't looking for any support. I mean, but he wasn't facing anything yet. But, if you just understand the emotion that's on him in this moment, it's for the same reason why, people are afraid of the dark. It's unknown. You don't know what's lurking. You don't know what's waiting. And your greatest fears start to take over. But, if somebody else is there with you, you're not as afraid. You're not saying that Jesus was afraid, but he could see, all things, and he knows all things. He knew why he came here. And he knew what he was going to have to face and what the battle would call, from him. And, all things of the Old Testament are a shadow of things for the New Testament. Like I said, when they were holding up Moses' hand, who knows why this thing, would have the significance that it, because, like I said, he's fully capable, he's fully able. Though all men should forsake him and he would have to go at it alone, he would. Though he had to walk, everyone's back turned to him. He knows who he is. Sometimes, information can carry you through, more than the other guy who is not, aware of this. They said knowledge is power. Him having, made the heavens and the earth. Because the Bible says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and He was the Word. We beheld the glory as the only begotten of the Father. He was there. They were making the angels. He was there when they were rebelling. The point of view that he has, seeing this world is more deep, not, hasty. It's more thorough. So he keeps checking, on them, going back and forth. So, one could ask, could they not, see that this meant something? He's not doing this for no reason. And he's never asked us, this before. But for whatever reason, they just were unable to rise to the occasion. They were unable, to meet him where he was. So like I said, he just, went a few steps away from them, from these three. Peter, James, and John fell down and began to pray. Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. First he said, let this hour pass from me. Then he said, let the cup. I'm guessing that he was within, eyesight of them, because he didn't go that far. Unless he went like behind a rock or behind a tree, or inside maybe there was some sort of separation. He just told them that all you shall be offended this night because of me. Things are always going over their head. When he said this night, were they aware that it was in this moment? Maybe if he had said, all of you shall be offended in me, even right now at this moment, maybe they would have looked with a different expectation. Being given this information and not, a definite time frame. It caused their mind to procrastinate. That's what they were doing. They put it off. Yeah, we know it's this. Yeah, he told us this night, but this is like one of those things that we never get around to doing. We just keep procrastinating. We just keep putting it off. So after praying, so he cometh to the disciples and findeth them sleeping, and said to Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Couldst thou not watch 1 hour? So, he addresses Peter. He's the leader. He's obviously the leader. We know that he's the oldest, or at least the Bible scholars would say that he was the oldest. Simon Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So they were asleep, physically. It was late in the night. When you have a routine, you go to bed at a certain time. The circadian rhythm, is what it's called. That takes on a identity of itself, and it tells you when it's time to sleep. I heard they did an experiment with bees where they removed them from their habitat and they put them somewhere where there was no sun, and they automatically knew when to go out hunting and when to go back in, as they didn't like lose time. They came back at the right time they were supposed to come back. They come back later, they didn't come back early. They were able to keep this rhythm, this timing, call it. So they are asleep. He just told them to tarry. One could ask the question, did they start out tarrying? Did they start out praying and then they, fell asleep while praying? Or did they just go right to bed? It doesn't, record what they did. So why does one fall asleep? One falls asleep, because, one falls asleep because, they believe that, whatever is going on around them is not, this is a time where I don't need to pay that much attention. I can go on autopilot. Autopilot, leads them to just, being, non-reactive, non-proactive. First reason I would say people fall asleep is because whatever's going on is not that much important to be paying attention to. People fall asleep, when they feel that they've entered a routine. It's something that they've done many times and they can just autopilot their way through it. Again, being non-proactive. People fall asleep because of ignorance. They don't know that this is something that they should be paying attention to. They don't have the information. They don't have the checklist. Because how do we identify things? Something that's dangerous. If you were to think about it and break it down to the basic components, you see it's a checklist. If you see a lion coming at you, how do you know that that's a moment of danger? Well, you identify this huge four-legged beast. You look at the color, you see the mane, you see the nose, eyes, the shape, you see the height. This is a cat, yeah, but look how big it is. So you fall asleep because you don't have the checklist. Evaluate what's going on in front of you. And being ignorant, you don't know any better. They say ignorance is bliss. That's a popular saying. People fall asleep because they've been seduced. Somebody has been feeding you wrong information. It's not just that you don't know. Somebody is sweet talking you somewhere, lying to you. Usually to get something that they want, something that it benefits them, and they do it till late. You get your guard down, so that then you fall asleep. People fall asleep out of frustration. You've done everything you could, and you're just frustrated. It's kind of like throwing your hands up in the air. People fall asleep after waiting too long for something. You were told that you're gonna get married. You've been waiting and praying, and nothing's happening, and you just kind of just like go into a state of sleep where you waited so long for it. It's like it's not coming. and you just enter a state. It's almost like a state of non-belief or disbelief. So people fall asleep for waiting too long. There's many reasons why people fall asleep. Yeah, but I would say overall, it's just like not being able to present in the moment. You're asleep. You're not present in the moment. You're not reacting as you should. Every reaction with every action, you do not give the right reaction, or you give no reaction. Things fly over your head. Things fly over your head, and you might not even see things flying over your head. So you coming back and find them asleep. Like I said, they start praying and then they fell asleep. Did they just go right to sleep? Could they not see him praying? Was he praying in his mind? Was he saying these words out? I mean, the emotion that he was supposed to be in, being that close. Could they not hear the concern in his voice? Fear. Well, I mean, fear for a less better, for lacking a better word. Could they not hear the concern and the distress and the uncertainty? If it be possible, let this cup pass from me. So he cometh and find them asleep, and said unto Peter, Simon, sleepest thou? Couldest thou not watch 1 hour? So he asked the question, and he addresses him. This just shows you the respect that he has for Simon Peter, the expectation. And he asked him this question to let them know that, hey, this is a time to be serious. This is not a time to be, so passive. It's not a time to be so calm about things. This is how he was expecting Simon Peter to fight. I said it yesterday when he pulled the sword. I mean, he hasn't done it yet. But sometimes when you miss your moment in life, all you can do is play catch up. Simon Peter pulling that sword, I mean, you could reason that it was him playing catch up. This moment where he fell asleep, where he should have been fighting. This is where you should have been swinging your sword, but the sword in the spirit, not in the flesh. So Simon Peter, sleepest thou? Couldest thou not watch 1 hour? What is 1 hour? We understand that a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. But watching 1 hour, literally, they weren't out there that long, because it was already night when they went out there. And we know that the cock crowing is when he would deny him. So we don't have that much time out there. So that 1 hour literally could have meant 1 hour. But then, the hour, it kind of, implies something that you're faced with right then and there. Situations change. The meaning of things change. You go from one meaning to another to another. So this is the hour. All right, so we just finished doing miracles, healing the people, raising the dead, casting out diseases, casting out devils, healing diseases. We just finished that hour. We're no longer in that hour. Yes, I'm capable of doing all these things yet still. But right now, this hour is where I'm taken. This hour is where, they put me to the test, where I am broken, where I am wounded for your transgressions and bruised for your iniquity. The chastisement of your peace being upon him, and by his stripes. This is not a glory moment. That rich young ruler, that rich young disciple, when he said, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. Jesus said, why callest thou me good? He said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said, thou knowest the commandments, thou shalt not kill, steal, commit adultery, honor thy mother, father. He said, I've done all these things. He said, one thing thou lackest, go and sell all that thou hast and give to the poor. That was the glory hour, and he wanted to be a part of it. But they weren't doing it for the glory. The glory was just a byproduct, a side product of what was going on. Because I mean, if you heal people from leprosy, imagine being put outside the camp, a man that's born blind or deaf, and now he can see for the first time. The glory that goes with that. So he wanted to be a part of the glory. But this is no longer the glory hour. There's no, the glory that you would want to be a part of. Because his death is always referred to as him being glorified. This is the hard hour right now. Couldst thou not watch 1 hour? Yeah, it was easy, to go through the glory hour, but now, it seems as if sometimes in life, when you need everything to go right, that's when it goes wrong. It's like, things take on a mind of their own. If it was some other day where it didn't matter, everything would just go smoothly. There would be no concerns, no interruptions, nothing to be addressed, nothing jumping out of place. But the second that you need everything to line up, you're on a time deadline, or you're running out of resources. That's when this starts going haywire. This starts, you got to go back to the beginning and fix that. The thing in the middle, that's jumping out of place. The thing at the end that was supposed to show up, that didn't. I know you got to go searching for that, and then everything is just So now here when he needs them to be there, this is when they sleep. But again, like I said, it is in the late midnight hour. So couldst thou not watch 1 hour after addressing Simon Peter? So he said, watch and pray that you enter not into temptation, for the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. So what is to watch and pray? Watch and pray, is active. There's a lot of anticipating in watching and praying. I said that watching and praying is watching to confirm that you have your checklist. It's good to think things through. What does it look like when it happens? What are some of the signs? We're watching for signs. We're watching for checklists. We're watching to confirm that these things are coming to pass. All these things they're happening in the spirit, so they can't see. But like I said, his prayers right now and his distress is what they should have been watching for. Him telling them that they should all be that this night they will all be offended in him. Start asking questions to yourself. What does that look like? How do I be offended in him? Watch and pray. They enter not into temptation. How do I what does that look like? Be offended in him. That means I'm going to look at him different. What's going to cause me to look at him different? Is it when we're alone by ourselves or when others are around? Is it when others come and then they get the majority opinion and then they start to color him in a certain way that's not so favorable, and we have no choice but to believe them when we start looking at him, and it's no longer the love and admiration that we feel for him, but we feel fear, we want to get away, we turn our backs and we leave him, though we always leave together, to watch and pray. So we're watching actively with what we have also, and we're asking God to provide the rest. God, help me to see what I am missing. God, give me your eyes. God, this is what I believe. This is what I expect it to look like. I know I might be right in some areas. I might be wrong in others. Help me, Lord. There's many things that go into watching and praying. Not being seduced, not falling asleep. Not, going against common sense. Having a mind of your own. Watching and praying were the chief priests, elders, and scribes not looking for the Messiah. And they were all supposed to be looking for him. What happened? I believe somebody even said, when Messiah comes, shall he do more miracles than this fellow does? I believe somebody has said that. You were on the right track. Are we not looking for the Messiah? Where's our checklist? Blind, like I said, people back from the dead. The one with the issue of blood. When they let that guy with the sick of the palsy down through the roof, he healed him. That sins be forgiven thee. Where's our checklist? So you enter not into temptation. So what is temptation in this aspect? If he says next that the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak, temptation is something that, it leads you to a state of, you're away from, being centered. You're no longer watching what concern. It's almost as if you no longer walk in the path. You've gone for a pit stop. You've gone for a pit stop somewhere. So watch and pray that you enter not into a pit stop. Where even if you were to see the signs, you see, because you're no longer where you're supposed to be. These signs, they have absolutely no meaning. You begin to rationalize a lot of things because temptation carries you away, does it not? I imagine being grounded, standing on your 2 feet. But temptation, it comes to take you off course, off balance. Because once you say yes to it, it takes you somewhere, does it not? You're no longer standing in the same place, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. But if you had said no to it, then you would have been in the same place. But saying yes, you're no longer in the same place. So watch and pray that you enter not into a pit stop. Takes you away from standing in the same place that you were supposed to be. For the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Understand the difference between the spirit and the flesh. That's why when you fast, you get stronger in the spirit. They oppose each other. The flesh cares for things of the flesh. Spirit cares for the things of the spirit. I ask a question. If the devil is spirit, why does he walk so much in the flesh? How could you be spirit but yet walk so much in the flesh when you are literally spirit? I think that's one of the great mysteries of life. How can the spirit literally walk in the flesh? You don't have no flesh. So that goes to show you that these things are choices and habits for him. These things are literally choices and habit. Him being a spirit, the flesh, things of the flesh feel good. And that's why it's so hard to break some of them, so many times, because it feels good. And it's the feeling, it's the dopamine, testosterone, it's the adrenaline, the feeling, the sensations that keep us, addicted to these things. But the devil, he doesn't have these things. So then you got to know that these things, they were established by habits, by choices that led to habits that he's choosing to do, rather than what we experience. Because he's spirit, he doesn't. So he went again, prayed, saying the same words. So after checking in with them, addressing Simon Peter, asking him to stay awake, pretty much, giving him the kind of emotional, reaction that it was supposed to wake something up in him and let him know, hey, we gotta, get serious. Right now, it's not time to be playing. So he went and prayed the same words. Father, if it be possible, let this hour pass from me. Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. In one interpretation, it said that, he prayed until his, sweat became drops of blood, or became like unto drops of blood. So he cometh unto them again, findeth them asleep, for their eyes were heavy, and they wished not to answer him. So after that, praying again, and like I say, it doesn't show a time frame, like how many hours he goes and prays for. And is he not right there next to them? Have they like leaned forward, praying on their knees, and they just fell asleep? So their eyes being heavy with sleep. So yeah, this is a physical tiredness. We've way past our bedtime. And these guys being, older men. Did they, there were no. Was there a night scene in those days? Were they, I know now we have, bars and nightclubs. Was there anything of a night nature? Back then. And, them having walked out with Jesus for all this time, no doubt they had been gotten into a routine. So they wished not what to answer him. So you know that he woke them up again, asking them, can you guys not watch with me? You guys are missing the moment. Everything's flying over your head. And they couldn't, give, a rational answer to anything he was asking. All they could do was just, stutter and hesitate. At this point, what are the other 8 disciples doing? Are they asleep also? But then, he didn't really ask anything from them. So they were free, to do as they felt they needed to do. But, this kind of freedom is not the good kind of freedom because, it doesn't matter. We're not asking anything from you. That's not where you want to be in life. With anything that happens, you want to be, the person that people come to for, help, for suggestions. You want to be a guiding, leader, as opposed to, somebody who they know they can't ask anything from because you don't know anything. You're not about anything. You're not part of anything. You don't desire anything. You're walking with nothing and you don't care. So then the third time, so we know that he went again and prayed the same words. So the third time he came, he said, sleep on now, take your rest. It is enough. The hour is come and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. So in this moment, we know that he's finished praying. Another interpretation, it said, the angel of the Lord, appeared, strengthening him as he prayed. So him having prayed, he poured out everything he needed to pour out. He heard what he needed to hear from God, even though it might not have been with, audible words that you could hear, but rather speaking to the Spirit. He got the strength that he needed. He got that exhale. He got that, reassurance that he needed. He came to the end of his prayer where he got enough that he could stop. Something signaled to him that, okay, we know that Judas was close by. God maybe didn't want him to be taken while he was down there praying. So we see a resolution here. Maybe now he's not as anxious. He's not, saying, Father, let this cup pass from me. So he said, sleep on, take your rest. So he knows that, this moment is past. Taken. The last moment before he's taken. Him having got there, now realizing that, he really didn't need anything from them and he already know this. But, looking at them right now as him being the master, them being, his children. So it is enough. The moment has been satisfied. What I need. Everything has been set up. It being enough means that whatever he was asking for, he received. Whatever he was needing, he got. All things are now satisfied and they're going according to plan. It is enough. The hour is at hand and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. So this is the hour where they couldn't take me at first, no matter what they wanted to do. As upset as he made them, they wanted to cast him head first and picking up stones, to throw at him, coming on to him, asking him all these questions. Who gave us all this authority? And by what doest thou these, things? There was a plan set out, by God the Father that how things should, unfold. So the hour is at hand. We know that he said, that the prince of this world, he cometh. His time is here and he had nothing in me. I have nothing in him. It is time for the prince of the world. This is his hour and he gets to do what he wants. Because, just like with Job, Job, he had to go through what he had to go through. Because, in the beginning, when the war broke out in heaven, the devil, he asked a lot of questions. Is God good? Is he just making us serve him? Does God know love? Is God concerned about your well-being? Is God fair? Who said God gets to be in charge? Who said we have to follow him? Who said we have to listen to him? The devil, he asked a lot of questions, during that time. And now this is how they get answered. Jesus is delivered into his custody, for him to do as he see it fit. So now we get to see where we, we're supposed to be bruised and wounded. We were supposed to be, beaten and crucified. We were supposed to be stoned. We were supposed to die. These things were supposed to happen to us. So now, being delivered now over into the devil's hand. The devil gets to do all these things while he takes our place, and doesn't even complain. So the devil, he's asking these questions. Who says that God loves or God knows how to love? He's just the most powerful and we have to do whatever he says. But then another question is also being answered. Devil, who are you? What are you about? What are the things that motivate you? What drives you? How do you think that life should unfold? How do you think of other people's happiness versus sorrow? How do you think the world should, be run? Where's the love? Where's the peace? Where's the joy? You're just angry and wanna, torture people. You're just angry. You wanna take everything from them. You wanna give them boils and sores. You're sending all these devils to possess people, cause all these diseases. So, two questions are being answered right now. The devil is being shown who he is. God is being shown who he is without using words. But the hour is come. This is their hour. It's like playing a sport, basketball or soccer. We inbound the ball, we bring it in. One team has the ball. It's their turn. They get to pass it around and try and score. No, we get to defend. Either we take the ball from them or it goes out of bounds and we get it, or they score and then we get the ball back. But the ball, no, they have the ball. So the hour is come, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. They have the ball right now, and it's not gonna be pretty. So then it says, "Arise, let us be going. He is at hand that doth betray me." So I know that some, time had to pass when he said, sleep on, take your rest. And then now he says, arise, let us be going. I know he didn't just say that one right after the other. So let us be going, for they're close by, and the time is now. I am Straw Greenhorn.